After an argument with my wife, Joan Newman, I momentarily stepped out of the car to pick up a package. When I returned, our son, Jimmy Newman, was gone. From that moment, I searched for him like a madman. Each waking hour was consumed by guilt. My mother-in-law blamed me. My mother cried herself to sleep. Joan jabbed a finger at my head and screamed, "Why are you still alive? If you don't find our son, I'm divorcing you." From that day forward, for 4 long years, I gave up my career and my life. I traveled across the country almost 100 times searching for my son, only to be met with disappointment every single time. My body became covered in scars from self-harm. I fell into severe depression. By the 100th trip, I could no longer summon the will to face another defeat. I swallowed an entire bottle of sleeping pills. As death closed in, I heard Joan talking to her childhood friend, Randy Kilk. "Joan, you've tormented him long enough. When are you going to tell Stephen that the boy was never missing? I can't wait to see the look on his face." Joan laughed and casually said, "There's no hurry. He forced me to abort our child, so now, he is suffering the consequences. When he finally understands his sins, I may consider telling him." So, the inhuman torment I had endured for 4 years had been nothing more than her punishment. As a final tear rolled down my cheek, my soul left my body. "Joan, you got exactly what you wanted. I died in Jimmy's nursery. I had wanted to stay as close to him as possible." Joan opened the bedroom door. When she found me absent, she assumed I had not come home yet. She turned and took Randy by the hand. Then, he pulled him down onto our bed. With an indifferent tone, she said, "He probably fell for another swindler's tale and ran off to some godforsaken wilderness." Randy laughed loudly. "It's not even the first time. I've never seen anyone so gullible. He believes everything every fraudster tells him. I remember that time he ran off into the mountains and nearly did not make it back. When the police finally found him, his clothes had been torn to pieces. He was standing there with a knife in his hand, completely out of his mind. 3 men were lying on the ground beside him. Nobody ever found out what happened." As soon as he said that, Joan's expression darkened. She shoved him away coldly. Realizing he had misspoke, Randy immediately wrapped an arm around her neck and pressed a kiss to her skin. "I'll stop. Joan, it's been so long since we last did it." Joan reversed their positions and pinned him beneath her. Her lips curled into a mischievous smile. "Don't mistake this for jealousy. I just find him pitiful. Had he only turned a blind eye back then, I would never have treated him like this. But he has blood on his hand. Those sins are his to bear. He has no one to blame but himself." After that, their clothes fell to the floor. Upon that very bed where we had made love countless times, they lost themselves in each other. I had thought death would leave me incapable of feeling pain, yet my heart ached like it had been stabbed. She was the one who had hugged me tightly and begged me that year. No matter how I tried to push her away, she would not let go. "Stephen, please don't leave me. I was drunk that night. I thought he was you. I'll get an abortion. Please believe me." When I refused to forgive her and insisted on getting a divorce, Joan had panicked. She even dragged Randy before me and made him apologize to me. Then, she underwent the abortion herself. In the end, I caved in. After months of struggling with the decision, I chose to forgive her. The price I paid was 4 years of being played for a fool. Their muffled moans continued late into the night. Breathless and spent, Joan finally seemed to remember me. She frowned and glanced toward the front door. "Where on earth is Stephen? If he's not coming home, the least he could do is send a message." With that, she dialed my number. After a few seconds of dead silence, a ringtone echoed through the house. Joan went rigid. Her gaze shot straight to Jimmy's nursery. A flicker of secret pleasure crossed Randy's lips. He feigned alarm and said, "When did Stephen come back? Do you think he heard us?" Joan dressed hastily and walked toward the nursery. I followed them and watched with cold detachment as she hesitated to open the door. Finally, with a soft creak, the door swung open. She walked to the bedside. I lay beneath the quilt. My entire body was curled into a tight ball. Joan's face cycled between pale and flushed. She assumed I was giving her the silent treatment. "Stephen, since you found out, there is no point hiding it anymore. Yes, I was the one who took Jimmy. But this all started because of you." She glanced at me and paused before continuing. "As long as you don't make a big deal out of it, we could still make this marriage work." Silence filled the room for dozens of seconds. Joan's expression soured further. She snorted. "Oh, so now you are pretending to be dead? Fine. Let us see how long you can keep this up." I watched her furious outburst with cold indifference. Whatever I had once felt for her was gone. I found myself wondering what expression she would wear when she finally realized she had been standing beside a corpse. Joan slammed the door and left, but she returned before long, leading a 4-year-old child by the hand. My eyes widened instantly. I recognized him at once. He was my son, Jimmy. His eyes were identical to mine. Tears spilled from my eyes. I rushed forward to embrace him, but my arms passed through his small body. Joan sounded almost pleased with herself as she dropped the child onto the bed. I've been keeping him at my mother's house this whole time. Now, I've brought him back. Happy? With that, she left again with Randy. What a monster. That woman was a monster. How could she abandon a 4-year-old child there alone? The dark room was silent. Jimmy began to cry in fear. It broke my heart. I swallowed my anguish and tried to soothe him. It's okay, Jimmy. I'm right here. I was a fool. How could the living ever hear the voice of the dead? Jimmy curled up beside me. He wept until exhaustion carried him into sleep. I watched him with a heart full of love. Bitter tears streamed down my face. He must have been so frightened and so hungry. Even in his sleep, pain was etched across his little face. I stayed by his side all night. The next morning, Jimmy sat up groggily. His young voice quavered with panic. Grandma, where are you? I'm hungry. He rubbed his swollen eyes and cast a timid glance at my corpse beside him. After a long hesitation, he asked in a soft voice, Mister, could you get up and find me something to eat? I promise I'll be good. I only need a little food. When no answer came, disappointment filled his face. He climbed off the bed. Then, he spotted the bottle on the floor. I panicked. They were my sleeping pills. A few tablets still remained. My spirit lurched in terror. Jimmy's face lit up with joy. Candy. He tipped the pills into his palm and turned to look at me. With a pleading little smile, he said, Mister, I will only take 3. I'm really hungry. Without waiting, he shoved them into his mouth. No. I screamed in desperation. I lunged to stop him, but my hands passed through him. The next moment, the door crashed open. Joan stood in the frame. The moment she saw what Jimmy was doing, her eyes widened in horror. She sprinted across the room and shoved her fingers into his mouth. Spit them out. Spit them out right now. Jimmy burst into terrified sobs. Please don't hit me. I'm sorry, Mommy. I won't do it again. After she was certain every pill was out of his mouth, the color returned to her face. She turned to look at me. Her eyes were filled with disgust. Before she could speak, Randy stepped forward and leveled his accusation at me first. Stephen, this is unbelievably irresponsible. Jimmy is only 4 years old. You could have gotten him killed. I know you are angry that Joan took him away, but you can't take your frustration out on Jimmy. He heaped his insults upon me without restraint while Joan watched in cold silence. Had they drawn closer, they might have taken notice of my skin, dry and waxy, and the faint odor beginning to rise from my flesh. Yet disappointingly, after standing there for 3 minutes, Joan picked up Jimmy and walked out of the room. She took Jimmy out for lunch, but throughout the meal, she seemed distracted. Joan unlocked her phone and stared at the screen. It had been nearly 2 days since I had last spoken to her. For reasons she could not explain, a rare sense of unease began creeping into her chest. I had never given her the silent treatment. I had once told her, when something goes wrong, I won't run from it. I'd rather face it head-on and deal with it. Even when I caught her cheating, when I was completely shattered, I had never backed away from a confrontation. Suddenly, something seemed to click in Joan's mind. Maybe something had really happened to me. She shot to her feet and muttered under her breath, no, something's wrong. She prepared to rush back home. However, Randy suddenly said, I saw Stephen get up and eat yesterday. Joan froze for a moment before turning around. She asked, he got up yesterday? Randy nodded and looked uncomfortable. Yeah. I even tried talking to him, but he ignored me. He told me to get out and everything. Joan's expression immediately darkened. She snorted and sat back down. I knew it. He's been pretending to be ill. Looks like all that talk about loving his son has been an act. He nearly got Jimmy killed. Floating above them, I could only let out a bitter laugh. Far from faking an illness, I was dead. As I watched the triumphant smile tug at Randy's lips, I found myself wondering whether he would still be able to smile when the truth finally came out. I drifted back home and spent several more hours keeping watch over my own body. My phone suddenly rang. It was my mother. After 2 days without hearing from me, she must have sensed that something was wrong. She called 3 times in a row. Finally, the ringing stopped. Just as I expected, less than half an hour later, she arrived. Her breathing was ragged. Her face was pale with worry. She headed straight for the master bedroom. Stephen? Stephen? When she did not find me there, she checked the guest room. Then, she opened the door to the nursery. Ah! Stephen! A heart-wrenching scream shattered the silence. What happened next was almost too painful for me to watch. Mom sobbed uncontrollably as she pulled my body into her arms and rocked back and forth. How could you leave me? How am I supposed to go on without you? Hours later, Mom took me away. The door opened again that evening. Joan stumbled inside, reeking of alcohol. She shoved Randy's supporting hand away and marched straight toward the nursery. Stephen, how much longer are you going to keep up this ridiculous act of playing dead? The words died on her lips. She froze. The bed was empty. I was gone. A strange pang shot through her chest. Then, she scoffed. So, you finally gave up the act and ran away from home? Fine. Leave. Don't ever come back. She returned to the living room and dropped heavily onto the couch. Randy curled his lip in disgust. Running off is one thing, but did he have to leave the house smelling like that? It's making me sick. Joan seemed not to hear him at all. As if she suddenly remembered something, she walked into the bedroom and yanked open the closet doors. All of my clothes were still there, untouched. Instantly, she let out a sigh of relief. I thought he had developed some pride. He didn't even take his clothes with him. This is just another stunt to make me come begging for him to come back. Well, dream on. With her mind at ease, she even let Randy move in. Since he doesn't care about this home, let's see how long he can keep this up. I watched it all with cold detachment as my spirit drifted silently through the rooms. Over the next few days, Joan spent her time partying and showing up at public events with Randy at her side. However, instead of becoming happier, she grew increasingly irritable and withdrawn. Finally, on the 7th day after my disappearance, she could no longer take it. She brought Jimmy back home. Opening our chat history, she shoved the phone toward him and ordered him to call for Daddy. Jimmy was so frightened that he could not speak. Joan's face darkened. She yelled in anger, "Say it. Are you deaf? I told you to call your father. Didn't you hear me?" Jimmy's fear finally overwhelmed him. He burst into tears. Rage consumed me. I wanted nothing more than to tear her apart with my bare hands. Jimmy was only 4 years old. She would stop at nothing just to torment me. Daddy. Daddy. After getting what she wanted, she sent the audio clip. Stephen, do you still want your son or not? What kind of father just sits back and lets his child cry like this? Randy walked over and wrapped his arms around her. His voice was gentle as he said, "Don't be upset, Joan. He's so heartless, so why do you still care about him? Someone like him doesn't deserve to be a father." Joan remained silent for a long time. Her eyes stayed fixed on her phone, which remained as quiet as ever. At last, she could not take it anymore. She called me. She called 3 times in a row. Nothing changed. No one answered. Smash. Joan hurled the phone against the wall and shattered it. Randy was startled. He was unable to grasp why she had flown into such a fury. His voice trembled slightly as he tried to calm her down. "Joan, Jimmy is right here. Don't get so worked up. If it comes to it, you can divorce him. It's not worth getting upset over him." The word divorce seemed to strike a nerve. Joan's eyes instantly turned bloodshot. Then, unexpectedly, she laughed. Divorce? Wouldn't that be letting him off too easily? She took a deep breath and bent down to pick up her phone. Its screen had shattered into a web of cracks. She called my mother. After what felt like an eternity of ringing, my mother finally answered at the very last moment. Before she could say a word, Joan blurted out impatiently, "Reese, where is Stephen? I need to talk to him." My mother's voice was hoarse. Each word seemed to claw its way out of her throat. "You monster. You'll never see him again. I hope you're happy now." Joan froze. She did not understand what my mother meant. Before she could ask, my mother hung up on her. Joan's face flushed with anger. She cursed under her breath. Then, she opened our chat and furiously typed a message. "Stephen, is this really what you want? Fine. You win. Get back here. I'll give you the divorce you want." There was no reply. The moment Randy saw the word divorce, he could barely contain his excitement. Grinning from ear to ear, he rushed into the bedroom to gather the IDs. However, when he came running back out, he saw Joan scoop up the still sobbing Jimmy and bolt out the door. "Joan, where are you going?" "Joan." Joan did not look back. She stomped on the accelerator. I drifted into the back seat beside Jimmy. Fury burned within me. "You crazy woman. Where are you racing off to? Have you no fear of an accident? Don't you care for Jimmy's safety?" It did not take long for me to realize where she was headed. Joan stood outside my mother's house, panting. She pounded on the front door with savage fury. "Stephen, open the door. I know you're in there. Stop hiding like a coward. If you have something to say it to my face." A moment later, the door creaked open. Someone stepped out. The anger had not even faded from Joan's face before terror washed over her, leaving her frozen in place. The door did not reveal Stephen. It was Reese, Stephen's mother. But she was unrecognizable. In the span of just a few days, her hair had turned almost entirely silver, clinging to her damp temples in thin, messy streaks. She wore a heavy black coat, and pinned to her chest was a small, white paper flower, the traditional Chinese sign of mourning. In her hands, clutched tightly against her chest, was a dark wood box. Next to it, tucked under her arm, was a large, black and white portrait of Stephen. His eyes in the photograph were kind, just as they had been before the 4 years of torment had hollowed him out. He was smiling. Joan's breath caught in her throat. The words she had prepared, the sharp, venomous demands for Stephen to stop hiding and act like a man, withered on her tongue. The cold air of the evening seemed to rush into her lungs, freezing her from the inside out. "Reese." Joan's voice was barely a whisper. She took a step back, her hand instinctively tightening on Jimmy's small shoulder. What is this? What kind of sick joke are you playing?" Reese did not cry. Her eyes were red-rimmed, dry, and entirely dead. She looked at Joan not with anger, but with a profound, chilling emptiness. "A joke?" Reese's voice was a raspy whisper, her vocal cords ruined from days of screaming and weeping. "You think my son's death is a joke, Joan? Don't lie to me." Joan's voice cracked, rising in pitch as panic began to override her logic. "Stephen is hiding inside. He's trying to punish me because I took Jimmy. He's using you to make me feel guilty. Tell him to come out right now." From the back seat of the car, Randy had finally caught up. He hurried down the driveway, panting, but stopped dead in his tracks the moment he saw the black and white portrait and the wooden urn in Reese's hands. The color drained from his face. "Joan," Randy muttered, his voice trembling. "Joan, let's go. Let's just go." "No." Joan screamed, shoving Randy away. She glared at Reese. "I don't believe you. Stephen would never do this. He's too weak. He loves me too much to ever leave me like this. Stephen. Get out here." She tried to push past Reese into the house, but Reese did not budge. She stood like a stone wall, her grip on the urn so tight her knuckles were stark white. "He is not in there, Joan," Reese said, her voice dropping to a horrifyingly calm register. "He is in here. What is left of him, anyway? The fire took what? Your cruelty didn't." Jimmy, confused and terrified by his mother's screaming, began to pull at Joan's coat. "Mommy, where is Daddy? Why is Daddy in the picture?" Joan didn't answer her son. She stared at the wooden box. The reality of the situation was a physical weight, pressing down on her chest, making it impossible to breathe. Yet, her mind desperately clung to denial. "If he's dead," Joan whispered, her lower lip trembling violently, "then where is the medical report? Where is the police record? You can't just pretend someone died." Reese slowly reached into her coat pocket. With a hand that shook uncontrollably, she pulled out a crumpled piece of paper and threw it at Joan's feet. "Read it," Reese whispered. "Read what you did to my boy." Joan sank to her knees on the cold concrete of the porch, her manicured fingers trembling as she picked up the paper. It was an official certificate of death from the county coroner's office. Name, Stephen Newman. Date of death, determined to be approximately 7 days prior. Cause of death, acute barbiturate toxicity. Suicide. Joan's eyes locked onto the date of death. 7 days ago. Her mind raced backward, counting the days. 7 days ago, that was the night. She had returned to the house with Randy. The night they had slept in the master bedroom, laughing, drinking, and making love. The night she had walked into Jimmy's nursery, seen Stephen curled up under the quilt, and assumed he was giving her the silent treatment. He hadn't been ignoring her. He had already been a corpse. No. Joan gasped, dropping the paper. She shook her head violently. No. That's impossible. That's a lie. She suddenly turned her head, her bloodshot eyes locking onto Randy, who was standing a few feet away, sweating profusely. Randy, Joan gasped, grabbing his trousers. You said you saw him. You told me you saw Stephen get up and eat the next day. You said he talked to you. You said he told you to get out. Randy stumbled backward, his face turning an ash gray. He stammered, his eyes darting around the quiet neighborhood. Joan, I thought. You lied to me? Joan's voice rose to a screeching halt. Randy. Did you lie to me? Floating above them, I watched Randy's pathetic display. I remembered the smirk on his face when he had told Joan that lie. He had wanted to keep her from checking on me. He had wanted to prolong her anger toward me so she would stay with him. He had wanted to keep me isolated. He had never imagined that his petty, manipulative lie would cover up a death. I just didn't want you to worry about him. Randy yelled, his voice cracking with fear. You were finally paying attention to me. I thought he was just being dramatic, hiding in the room. I didn't think he was actually. You let me sleep in that house with his body. Joan screamed, lunging at Randy. She clawed at his face, her fingernails tearing into his skin. I was in the next room. I brought Jimmy back to that house. Jimmy was sleeping next to. She choked on her own words, the horror of the memory crashing over her like a tidal wave. She had dragged a 4-year-old child into a room with a decomposing body. She had left her son alone in that dark room. Jimmy had climbed onto the bed, cried himself to sleep next to his father's cold, lifeless flesh, and had almost eaten the very pills that had killed him. You monster. Joan screamed at Randy, but she was screaming at herself, too. Reese watched the chaotic scene with cold disgust. She took a step back and began to slowly close the door. Reese. Wait. Joan scrambled back to the door, slamming her hands against the wood. Please. Let me see him. Let me see Stephen. You will never see him again, Reese said from behind the narrowing gap. You took his life, piece by piece, for 4 years. You don't get to weep for him now. The police have already opened an investigation into child endangerment. Enjoy what little time you have left with your son, Joan. Because I am going to take him away from you, just like you took my Stephen from me. The door clicked shut, locking with a heavy, final thud. The days that followed were a blur of cold rain and suffocating silence. Joan returned to our house, but it was no longer a home. It was a tomb. The air in Jimmy's nursery still carried the faint, sweet, sickening odor of decay that no amount of bleach or incense could mask. Randy had packed his bags and fled the very night of the confrontation at Reese's house, terrified of the legal repercussions and Joan's escalating instability. But Joan didn't care about Randy anymore. She sat on the floor of the nursery, her clothes stained, her hair unwashed. She clutched Stephen's old college sweater to her chest, rocking back and forth. Stephen. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. She muttered continuously, her voice hoarse. I floated in the corner of the room, watching her. I felt no satisfaction in her grief. There was no joy in seeing the woman who had destroyed me break down into nothingness. There was only a profound, hollow exhaustion. The door to the nursery crept open, and Jimmy peeked in. He was holding a small, dirty teddy bear. His eyes were wide with a fear that no 4-year-old should ever have to carry. Mommy? Jimmy whispered. Are you sick too? Like Daddy? Joan flinched. She looked at her son, the boy she had hidden away in a dark, lonely room at her mother's house for 4 years, using him as a pawn to torture the husband she claimed to hate. Jimmy. Joan sobbed, crawling toward him on her knees. She reached out to hug him, but the moment her hands touched his shoulders, Jimmy flinched and pulled back. "Don't hit me," the boy whimpered, shielding his face with his tiny arms. "I'll be good. I won't eat the candy anymore." The words were a dagger to Joan's heart. She realized, with agonizing clarity, what she had done. In her quest to punish me for a perceived sin, an abortion she had chosen to have after her own infidelity, she had not only killed her husband, but she had also traumatized her only child. Before she could speak, the doorbell rang. It was a loud, demanding sound that shattered the quiet of the house. Joan stood up on shaky legs and walked to the front door. When she opened it, she was met by 2 police officers and a woman dressed in a sharp gray suit. "Joan Newman," the woman in the gray suit asked, pulling out an identification card. "I am Sarah Jenkins from Child Protective Services. We have received a formal complaint regarding the welfare of Jimmy Newman." The police officer stepped forward. "Ma'am, we have a warrant for your arrest on charges of child endangerment and criminal neglect, stemming from the events of last week. You need to come with us." Joan stared at them, her mind blank. She looked down at Jimmy, who had crawled out of the hallway and was hiding behind her legs, looking at the police officers with wide, terrified eyes. "No," Joan whispered, her voice rising. "No, you can't take him. He's my son. He's all I have left." "Ma'am, do not resist," the officer warned, reaching for his handcuffs. The legal battle was swift, brutal, and played out in the harsh glare of public scrutiny. Because of Stephen's background, having given up a promising career as an architect to spend 4 years searching for his missing son, the local media quickly caught wind of the story. The headlines were savage. "The ultimate cruelty, wife hides son for 4 years as punishment, driving devoted father to suicide. The boy who was never missing, the tragic death of Stephen Newman." Joan's face was plastered across every news channel and social media platform. The community that had once watched in pity as Stephen searched the streets now turned on Joan with a visceral, burning hatred. Her mother's house was vandalized, her own friends blocked her calls. During the custody hearing, Reese sat on the plaintiff's side, represented by one of the city's top family lawyers. Joan sat on the defense side, looking gaunt and hollow, her court-appointed attorney looking increasingly desperate. The turning point of the trial came when the judge reviewed the medical reports and the testimony of the child psychologist who had interviewed Jimmy. The psychologist's report was read aloud in the quiet courtroom. The child, Jimmy Newman, exhibits severe symptoms of developmental trauma and neglect. He has spent the majority of his formative years isolated in a single room, told by his grandmother and mother that his father did not want him and that he must remain hidden. Most damagingly, the child was left unattended in a room with his father's deceased body for nearly 48 hours, during which he attempted to ingest the lethal medication that caused his father's death. He associates his father with the sleeping mister and expresses extreme fear of his mother's anger. As the report was read, a collective gasp echoed through the gallery. Joan covered her face with her hands, weeping loudly. "I loved him. I did it because Stephen forced me to abort our baby. He deserved to feel the pain of losing a child." Reese stood up, her voice ringing clear and cold through the courtroom. "He did not force you, Joan," Reese said, staring down her daughter-in-law. "You had an affair with Randy. You got pregnant, and you didn't know whose child it was. You aborted it out of guilt and fear that Stephen would leave you. Stephen forgave you. He stayed with you. And this is how you repaid his love." The judge slammed his gavel down, calling for order, but the damage was done. The truth was out, stripped of Joan's self-serving lies. The judge's ruling was absolute. "Joan Newman, your actions demonstrate a profound lack of moral character, parental fitness, and basic human empathy. Effective immediately, your parental rights are terminated. Full and permanent custody of Jimmy Newman is awarded to his grandmother, Reese Newman." "No!" Joan screamed, lunging across the table toward the judge. "You can't do this. Jimmy! Jimmy!" The bailiffs quickly grabbed her, pinning her arms behind her back as she thrashed and screamed. I stood beside Reese, watching as Joan was dragged out of the courtroom in handcuffs. For the first time in 4 years, I felt a faint, warm breeze blow through my chest. With the custody battle decided, the criminal trial for Joan and Randy began. Randy, ever the coward, immediately attempted to strike a plea bargain. He offered to testify against Joan in exchange for a lighter sentence. He detailed every conversation, every meeting, and every lie they had concocted to keep the charade going. On the witness stand, Randy looked small and pathetic. She was obsessed, Randy stammered, refusing to look at the gallery. She hated Stephen because he made her feel guilty about the affair. She wanted to break him. I just went along with it because I wanted to be with her. I didn't think he would actually kill himself. And when you lied about seeing Stephen alive and eating, the prosecutor asked. Why did you do that? I knew Stephen was in the nursery, Randy whispered, his voice barely audible. But I thought he was just ignoring us. I didn't want Joan to go in there and make peace with him. I wanted her to stay angry at him so she would stay with me. The jury did not show him mercy. Randy Kilk was sentenced to 5 years in state prison for conspiracy, child endangerment, and obstruction of justice. Joan's sentencing was even more severe. The judge, citing the extreme psychological torture she had inflicted on her husband and the profound neglect of her child, sentenced her to 15 years without the possibility of parole. The night before she was to be transferred to the state penitentiary, Joan sat in her holding cell. The cell was cold, dark, and silent, much like the nursery where I had died. She stared at the concrete wall, her mind finally fracturing under the weight of her guilt. She began to see things. In the corner of the cell, the shadows seemed to twist and form the shape of a man. Stephen? Joan whispered, crawling forward on the cold floor. Is that you? Have you come to take me back? I was indeed there, standing in the corner of her cell. But I did not look at her with love, nor did I look at her with anger. I looked at her the way one looks at a stranger who has wandered into the wrong place. You got what you wanted, Joan, I whispered, though she could only hear it as a cold draft that made her shiver. You wanted me to suffer. I suffered. But now it's over. Joan reached out to touch the shadow, but her hands met only cold concrete. She collapsed onto her side, weeping into the dirty floor, realizing that the man who had loved her more than life itself was gone forever, and she would spend the rest of her days in the prison of her own making. 2 years later. The afternoon sun filtered through the leaves of a large oak tree in a quiet suburban park. A young boy, now 6 years old, ran across the grass, chasing a bright red soccer ball. He laughed, a clear, joyful sound that echoed through the warm air. His cheeks were flushed with health, and his eyes, identical to mine, sparkled with life. Grandma, look! Jimmy called out, kicking the ball toward a park bench. Reese sat on the bench, a gentle smile gracing her face. The silver in her hair was still there, but the hollow, haunted look in her eyes had been replaced by a quiet peace. She caught the ball with her foot and laughed. Good job, Jimmy. You're getting so fast. I sat on the branch of the oak tree above them, watching them. My spirit had not departed this world immediately. I had stayed to ensure my son was safe, to make sure my mother was whole again. I watched as Reese pulled a small juice box and a sandwich from her bag, handing them to Jimmy, who sat beside her on the bench, chattering happily about his day at school. He was safe. He was loved. The trauma of his early years was slowly fading, replaced by the warmth of a grandmother's devotion. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the park, I felt a strange light sensation in my chest. The anchor of pain, guilt, and anger that had bound my soul to this earth for so long was finally dissolving. I looked down at my mother and my son one last time. Goodbye, Mom, I whispered. Goodbye, Jimmy. A sudden, gentle gust of wind swept through the park, rustling the leaves of the oak tree. Reese stopped laughing for a moment. She looked up at the branches, a soft, knowing expression crossing her face. She closed her eyes and let out a long, peaceful sigh, as if she could feel my touch on her shoulder. We love you, Stephen, she whispered to the wind. I smiled, closed my eyes, and let the light take me